Mauri oho, mauri tū, mauri ora. Kia tātou, haumi e, hui e, taiki. Mōrena e te whānau, kia ora and welcome to Creative Mornings for your August episode. Very excited to see quite a full house today, so that's very nice. And the magical people that sat up the front, just for me, after I made a big deal about it. So, this month, our global theme, is ritual. The lovely Claire, who is my co-host, who helped organise all the wonderful breakfast foods today for you, is going to read out the synopsis about our theme, ritual. Okay.
Rituals add meaning and a deeper sense of connection to our life. They allow us to practice mindfulness and reflection. Unlike our daily routine and habits, rituals have the power to inspire us. Brushing your teeth is routine. Going for a morning walk would be a good habit. And writing a gratitude journal can become your morning ritual. The key is to act with intentionality. Our Creative Mornings events have their own rituals. Getting a cup of coffee creates an opportunity to say hello to someone new while you wait your turn in line. Reading our manifesto out loud reinforces our belief that everyone is creative and everyone is welcome. What rituals do you practice in your relationships, your spirituality, and your creative work? How do they heighten your sense of purpose and belonging in this world? Thank you. And just what I've got for you line briefly, I just wanted to mention Christine, my lovely co-host. She celebrated a milestone this week at her 1-year host anniversary. She's very impressive, and not only does she do a fabulous job of introducing us every month, but she does so much work behind the scenes. And so on behalf of myself and the rest of the volunteers, we've got you a little gift.
What? Can we sing happy anniversary? You can pick that one up.
So yeah, thank you, Christine. We appreciate you.
Oh, amazing! Thank you, that was super nice. I started as host for Creative Mornings in August of last year. So, August last year, I'm trying to remember what it was. I believe it was Pride with Thomas Kopal, who was a producer. So, who was there? Was anyone there? Yes! Yeah, fantastic. So, that was my first Creative Mornings last year. Thanks, team. Field trips. Just as a reminder, if you want to have a little bit more Creative Mornings in your life, there are field trips every month, which are online global events that you can tune into, and they're actually hosted by people like you folks, creative people in the community that have something they want to share and offer. If you want to know a little bit more, come chat to me after, or check out the Creative Mornings website for field trips. And a lovely big thank you to all of our wonderful sponsors, as usual. 6 Barrel Soda for our speaker gift. Libertine Blends for the delicious teas. Coffee Supreme for your ritual coffee in the morning. And All Good Oat Milk. As well as Colourcraft for our labels. Oh, it's also Daffodil Day. Or is that tomorrow? Anyway, bye Daffodil. Bag Baker for our breakfast cookies. And 40 Thieves for the delicious peanut butter. I had that chocolate superfoods one this morning, and I think that is probably my favourite in the world. Thank you to 257 as usual for this beautiful space. We have a guest photographer today, Jack Young. Wave Jack, wave. So Jack is in his final year at Massey University studying photography. And Hype Entertainment and Stories with Ethan for our videography today. So Ethan's over here and Em's out the front. Yay! And a shout out to our newest sponsor, Em's Bread. Where's Em gone? There she is. Hey, thank you for the toast and bread. Vote. Yep, fantastic. So thank you so much. We kind of cheekily approached Em a few months back, and she very kindly accepted to help us out. So thank you, Em. And also shout out to our amazing volunteers every month. Can I get you all to stand up? stand up. You don't have to do anything. I just want everyone to see your lovely faces. And a big thank you. Follow us on the following things. Namely Instagram, because that's the one that I check. Also Twitter, or X, or whatever is preferred. We also have Facebook and LinkedIn, in which we make events. Who came to us via a LinkedIn or Facebook event today? Couple of you? Yeah, fantastic. It's doing its job. Cool. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Peter. So I've known Peter since 2016. We discussed this. So Peter is actually a member of my shared studio space. So I know Peter pretty well at this point, and I see him probably 5 days a week.
Sorry about that.
Poor Peter. But I am very interested to hear what he's got to say, because I feel we might delve into things that I've never heard before. So a big warm round of applause to Peter, who will speak about ritual.
Thanks, Kristen. Real nice. Yeah, morning everybody. So it's sort of interesting to come here and do this. I think at one point, read the official synopsis that came out from the CreativeMornings International about this, and then promptly forgot it, but found that actually pretty much everything I've put together today is very much based around some of the things they had there too. So I feel like if I could have just elongated that or stuck it into ChatGPT and asked it to make it longer, maybe I could have come up with a really on-point presentation. Hang on, here we go. That's that one, yeah. There we go. The only thing that I'm sort of adding, I am talking about coffee a lot. I know that was part of the synopsis there. Coffee is one of those things that we think about in terms of our sort of daily rituals, so it's a nice touch point for that. But I am adding quite a bit to do with the idea of how we evolved in our ancestry, and this idea that it's not just an idea, it's mostly proven fact, that because ritual was such an important part of group cohesion in our ancestral environment, that actually we evolved around that, and to try and separate ourselves from that just doesn't really work. And there are plenty of people and who go down lots of different interesting avenues on the sort of search or quest for ritual, or that sort of sense of meaning, when really they can do some smaller things every day in their lives in our modern environment that can also give them that same experience. So that's me. That's me in one of my earlier quests for a sense of community and a sense of belonging and spirituality and enjoying ritual. So that's me, believe it or not, as a teenage evangelist. I used to tip up on the street and talk to people about Jesus a lot. I spent a summer touring around the North Island on the back of a huge, big, purpose-built house truck. The whole side of it folded down to be a stage. And it was kind of family who were this band, and I used to go around with them, and they'd play music, and then I'd talk to people afterwards. But really, that whole period of my life, which went on for a very long time, was more about the things I enjoyed with the ritual sense of what I would experience from, in this case, church. And what that was the experience of people coming together as a group with a shared purpose, a shared intention, lots of singing in unison, talking in unison. You know, at churches, you stand up and you sit down together. There's all these different things that we do to remind ourselves that we're in a sort of different mindset or a different space. So that was the thing that I really enjoyed about that. And when I lost interest, shall we say, in Christianity, that was that was the thing that I missed. I didn't miss the belief system or the texts. The thing I missed was this shared experience of people doing something meaningful together. Yeah. But there are some wonderful and weird places that I have looked for, as I say, that sense of community before. And after my sort of teenage evangelist phase, I had a few other weird ones, including this one, which I don't want to say too much about. But suffice to say, this was for a TV pilot that did not get picked up, which I'm really pleased about, because nobody wants to be known as the guy in crushed velvet holding a dagger above some unsuspecting people. So when we think about ritual, I think what we often consider is this idea of two different things. And I think they were both in the sort of synopsis from CreativeMornings. But there is high ritual, this idea that people come together and do things in this mass environment. Perhaps it's a very decorative space. I'm thinking very ornate churches. I'm thinking Italy. or something which is quite small and minute, like this idea of, well, we drink coffee, we brush our teeth, etc., etc. And something that I'm interested in is how we can bridge the gap between those two things. Because on the one hand, we do tend to think of things like the coffee or the brushing of the teeth as a habit, rather than something which has meaning behind it. And not all of us are inclined to be going to these sort of mass, very ornate spaces to do things on a particularly early time on a weekend morning. And so I think it's nice to be able to find a way that we can make both those things work for us. So I'm interested in what I would call sort of a third path there, the space between the high ritual and the things that we might consider habit anyway. And a big part of that really is this idea of intent. So that's something I'm going to come back to later in the presentation. And again, this was in the synopsis, so I really could have just fleshed it out. But intent is the thing that makes something that otherwise seemed quite mundane into something which can give us purpose and meaning. Let's carry on from there. All right, so ancestral environments, or going back a long time. The waterfall dance I really, really love. So Jane Goodall, who was that, Gorillas in the Mist, she went and lived with a bunch of high primates for years and years and years, was integrated into society. Fantastic, fantastic anthropologist. One of the things that she noticed and actually videoed was that chimpanzees, after a particularly stormy event or something which might otherwise be seen as being unsettling or something that they didn't quite understand, would come together and gather around this particular waterfall, and they would gather in a group and they would sway back and forward, and they'd make these kind of like, I'm not going to do it, but they would make these chimpanzee guttural sounds in unison together, and that was something which appeared to be calming to them after they had experienced the thing that they didn't really necessarily understand. Now, I'm not qualified to say whether or not that's just a habit or something that they were doing out of a real need as a group to find a sense of security or safety after that, but she says it is, and she's the anthropologist, so I'm going to believe her. This QR code will take you to the video. There's a video interview from National Geographic talking with her and showing more of that video, but it's really quite fantastic, this idea that even that far ago, and she has other examples of it too, but the waterfall one's particularly striking because it's loud and there's all sorts of things going on. But she definitely identified and saw that high primates have the sense of needing to come together in a group to do things in unison to perhaps make themselves feel more secure and safe after an unexpected experience. Göbekli Tepe, who's heard of this? Oh man, yes, I can't wait to tell the rest of you about it. This is awesome. So this is the earliest example of human settlement anywhere from 9,500 BCE. It's on the Syrian-Turkey border, which is unfortunate because it makes it very hard to visit at the moment. But there's a German guy who's been excavating that since I think the late 70s. But they have, it's so long ago, and it rewrote the whole concept that we knew of human, what we consider to be civilized history. And the reason for that was we didn't think that people were doing this kind of thing that far back. It was Stonehenge and a few old bits, but we really thought that the idea of something which is at this point 11,500 years ago, of people coming together to build some massive structure was just unheard of. What it is it's this incredible, huge area of stone, massive T structures, incredible carvings of snakes and crocodiles and other animals that we're not necessarily sure were actually in the region have been carved onto these things. And the reason it was so exciting to discover and rewrite our own sense of history was because partially the idea was how do you build that? Because to build something that big, you need to have people who are able to work on it full time. For someone to work on something full time and not be producing things that they can eat and use usefully, there has to be a surplus of supply that they can then, imbibe on. You can't have. I think that makes sense. So the situation was, we'd never really thought about this before, that early on there would be a society where people were producing enough stuff to allow some others to be these full-time builders of something which was in essence seemingly unimportant, right? It's a large sort of temple ritual structure. And you would have thought in a hunter-gatherer community that wasn't something people were able to do. Turns out it's not a hunter-gatherer community, and this is why it's so exciting, because we invented agriculture to build this structure. That's the current accepted thought process. They've found all around here all kinds of different buildings and houses and granaries and types of different types of grains together to suggest that actually what happened was people were so interested in a need to build this massive temple ritual, call it what you will, structure, that they actually came together for what we believe is the first time, brought all kinds of different grains from their own areas, bred them together into a way that they could then actually grow those into these massive sort of wheat, etc., crops, and invented agriculture. So before this, we believe that we were hunter-gatherers. This was the point where people came together and actually changed the way that all of human society would work from then on out in terms of being an agricultural society. I recommend looking it up. I mean, and the photos of the animals and things that they have are really, really quite incredible. And Stonehenge, you know, it's a bit newer. You can see I'm a bit old, medium, if you can believe it, newest. Stonehenge is one of those places where people asked for years and years, well, why is it here? I'm not sure if you guys remember the fox song. Who remembers the fox song? Well, they're the same people. I pronounce it Yalvis. I'm sure that's not how it's meant to be pronounced. But they put together a series of really hilarious videos. One of them is about who the fuck built a Stonehenge. And again, if you scan the QR code, you can watch the full video. But there are a few things that we do know about Stonehenge. We do know that it was built for people as a meeting place, for people to come together from all over the British Isles. We know that they came annually, funnily enough, and we know when they came on the solstice. We also know that there is a particular path and a processional they used to walk at to get there. So for a long time, the question was, were they just using this as a place to come together, have a big party, do some trade, make sure that they weren't just breeding amongst their own small pool of tribes, that they could actually do, you know, get some genetic diversity in there. But we do know that, so who's been to Stonehenge? Yeah. So these days it seems to be on this big plain in Salisbury. There used to be a river that ran quite close to it. And we know that people used to come there in their ships and boats, and then they would form this massive processional that would then walk up to the main stone. So that processional gives it sort of a definite sense that this was a ritual experience that they were engaging in. And in fact, I mean, just as an aside to Stonehenge, I absolutely love it. I went to a conference once at Bristol University. It was a joint conference run by the history department and the music department. I was super excited. I went there expecting, you know, to have a really hard time actually getting in. There were 8 people, which was greatly disappointing. But just very briefly on Stonehenge, other cool things that they had was they found that the blue stones that go around it, some of the outer ones, this is totally mad to me, but they were able to acoustically map this whole thing out and generate things. So if you're on one side of the stones and you're beating a drum, as you walk around the stones when they were complete, that drum beat, which you're doing steadily, actually increases in speed and then decreases as you get to the opposite side to be equal, and then goes through the same process on the way back. So it's actually changing your sense of rhythm and space, which is mind-blowing. It's not something people even think to do anymore, but I was really into that at the time. Hang on, where am I? I've been talking for so long, my notes have disappeared. So ritual was definitely something that we were evolved around. It's something which our brains are used to having, that it expects to have. And as we'll get on to, rituals can be all kinds of things, and we can make our cup of coffee something more meaningful too. And then we have the things that we're kind of more used to today, right? Modern religious ceremonies, rituals to mark the patches of our lives. So again, the modern religious ceremonies have a lot of things in common with the old ones. We dress in a particular way normally. People, even for church, will dress in their Sunday best. If you're part of the clergy, you have particular styles of clothes that you're expected to wear. We gather together, we speak in unison. We do a call and response back and forth with people sometimes. We stand up, we sit down when we're supposed to. And these are just all sort of hallmarks of things that have been done in rituals basically as far back as we can remember. The swaying together in time, those guttural sounds that I'm not going to make, all those sorts of things we still carry through to today. And to be fair, while it's not for me, those sorts of religious ceremonies do bring comfort and a sense of security and safety to billions of people around the world. And in terms of rituals marking the patches of our lives, we often don't think about this, but civil unions and marriages and various things, they still have a ritual structure to them. I was married twice to my wife. We had to do it twice. We were in the UK and we wanted to have an outdoor wedding, but you can't do that in the UK. You're restricted to either a sort of county courthouse or being in a church, Church of England specifically. The Catholics, I think, still have to go and get married first of all in the sort of official structure. So we went there for that, and then we had our sort of wedding that we look back on as being the really cool one, which was in a Neolithic stone circle. You can hire them out in the UK. That was particularly cool. But looking back on it, even the one that we didn't really care about too much at the time, that was just ticking the boxes, was actually an example of a ceremony that we went to. You had to say certain things. You had to walk up the aisle at a particular time. My wife lost a bet, so we walked up the aisle to Barry White covering Just the Way You Are. But one thing that I do know that we talk about a lot, psychologists do talk about and lament, is the loss of a transitional rite of passage towards adulthood in modern Western society. There are lots of societies and cultures that still have that, but it's something that we really lack. And we talk more and more about this idea of never really growing up, and well, I'm 44, but I still feel like I'm a teenager. Sometimes act that way too. But if we had something more akin to that, I think it would solve a lot of those problems that people see elsewhere. Just something to demarcate that you were in this particular position in society. Now you're in a different one, and there are different expectations of you, but also extra freedoms too. So ritual is more than religion. And we see that with the primates, they certainly weren't wearing silly hats and calling themselves silly titles. But it's something which, because we've evolved with it so much, I think it's really key that we look for ways that we can bring ritual into our lives in a way that aren't just religious. So these are, These are rituals we already do on the reg. I'm not sure why I put a hashtag there. That's terribly embarrassing. So there are things that we do by ourselves, and this is that sort of first cup of coffee that we do, something which doesn't lend itself necessarily to being ritualistic, but we do them as more of a habit than anything. And there's actually lots more of these than we might think about. I mean, sometimes if you get into the office like me and you have a chair that doesn't really quite stay at the height it's supposed to, the mechanism's broken, one of the first things I do every morning is sit down and remind myself and get up and pull the chair up so I can be upright. And all these things that we do sort of habitually and daily, that we do by ourselves that we don't necessarily think about. This is really important actually. From that first cup of coffee to brushing your teeth, always in that order. Has anybody ever tried to brush their teeth before their cup of coffee? Terrible, terrible idea. And then there are things that we do with others as well, like coming together at Creative Mornings. And there's all sorts of ways that this is already ritualized that we don't think about. So everybody gets together in the kitchen space and is having breakfast and a community feel. And then eventually Christine says, hey, come on, guys, it's time to come to here. And when that happens, that's what we call a transitional space. So you are walking from one area into another, and things do change in your mindset in that moment. You're changing, thinking about your expectations, what's expected of you, what you would like to get out of the experience, how you're going to interact with somebody at the front rather than people just around together. So there's all these different ways that even at Creative Mornings we are ritualizing the experience without necessarily realizing that that's what we're doing. But it is realizing that's key. And there are lots of tiny little small rituals that we take part in a group of people. And we develop them really quickly. In families, we get these little silly things that we do, for example, which becomes almost ritualized. My daughter, who is 12, she won't go to sleep unless I play the Lammy Rammy game, which is that she has a little sheep, little toy, and it has to walk up to her and say it's Lammy, and she says, no, you're Rammy. Then it has to really squish on her face really hard. Unless I do that, she won't sleep. And you'd think that would keep her up. So that is sort of an example of something that just happens all the time. Another one, I remember I have a Russian sister-in-law, and I'm not sure if it's a Russian thing. If anybody here has experience of Russia, they can tell me afterwards, or if it's just a familial thing that she has. But the whole family, is together doing things, having a meal, broken up afterwards. People are walking around talking, playing games, whatever. She can't leave until everyone comes together in the lounge and sits down for at least just 2 or 3 seconds. But for her, that is a way that signals that actually this experience has ended, and now there's another different state that we're switching into. So there's lots of these that we come across all the time. I have another silly one that I do whenever I leave the office. If I'm the one to lock up, I I think we've all been here. You get to your car and you wonder, did I really lock the door? So what I do is I take my thumb and I jam it really hard into the actual locking mechanism of the where the key goes until there's a proper indentation, and that way I get down to the car afterwards. I can look at my thumb and think, yes, it still hurts. I definitely locked my car. So this idea of using ritual to enhance creativity or our lives differently is all about brain hacking. And I'm big into brain hacking. I'm always trying to find ways that I can do things differently that actually aren't trying to make my brain do something it's not meant to do. Frankly, our brains are expected to do all kinds of things it's not meant to do in modern society. So I'm trying to find ways that I can play back into the things it was evolved to do and is happier to do, and see if I can do things with that. So this comes back to something I mentioned at the beginning of looking to find how we can bridge that gap between the high ritual and things that we might just consider habitual. So there is this idea in psychology of a flow state. Who's come across this concept? Yeah, awesome. So flow state's absolutely fantastic. It's literally you just sit down and you get so into it that you don't even notice that you're doing it. And you can get to the end of a day or a couple of hours or something you're doing with a project, and you look at it and you think to yourself, this is actually really good. How on earth did I get here? Because I'm not aware that I was doing it. So my question after the experience always became, I need to remember what was happening at the time so that I can then repeat that. But actually what I really needed to repeat was how to get into that sense of flow in the first place. And I'm sure we've all been here. You drive somewhere in a car, you do the drive all the time. You can't remember the journey when you get to the end. You ask yourself, how did I get here? And it's that sense of being so in the zone that you just don't even need to think about it, which is scary when you're driving a car, to be fair. But if you're doing this creative sort of process, being in that flow state is something to really, you can't enjoy it because you don't even really know what's happening. But looking back on it, it's something to be treasured, I feel. So here is sort of my ideas for how we can make ritual something which is useful for us just on the daily. This is my definition of ritual. I looked them up. I wanted to start my talk by saying, according to the OED, ritual is defined as, but I didn't like any of the definitions because they were based around things like habit. And really, I want this to be an intentional thing that we do. So this is my definition. Ritual is a process intended to bring about a change in perception. It's a process because it's something you have to actually do. And if you can do it physically, all the better. What we were trying to do is bring about that change in perspective so that we can be in a flow state or at least be aware that we're doing something different now. We all have so many things going on in the back of our heads so often. It's really hard sometimes even just to sleep, let alone to sit down to do something creative and still be able to be in the moment with that. So the difference between having coffee in the morning out of habit and doing it in a way that can prepare you for the day to come is intent. So I think it's really cool to be present in the moment and to be mindful. Now I had this really silly idea for how to do this once. Somebody said to me, oh, mindfulness is cool. It was a new thing. I was quite young. I was like, I'm going to give that a go. The way I interpreted mindfulness was that I wanted to be always thinking about what I was actually doing in that moment. So for a whole week of my life, at about 23, I narrated out loud every action I made from the time I woke up time I went to sleep. It was literally doing the dishes. And now I'm putting the fork in the sink. And now I'm scrubbing the fork. And now I'm putting the fork to the side. I'll tell you what, though, I really didn't think about much else apart from what I was physically doing. But I think there are better ways to achieve it. But being present is really just the idea of being aware of where you are and what you want to be doing, I would say. And mindfulness, I think we have all learned a lot about that at this point in time. It's come a long way from the days of self-narration, but it is good. But this sense of a special space. So this is particularly when we come to do sort of creative things, if it's art, if it's making websites, whatever we might be up to. We used to call this in some circles that I used to move around in creating a sacred space. I believe in my days in Christianity it was called when the Holy Spirit descends. But the idea really is just about being aware that you are carving out for yourself an internal sense that where you are now is not of the other things that you've got to do in your day. And again, this helps getting into the sense of flow state. If you sit down to do something and you're still thinking about every other goddamn thing that you have to do, it really kills the vibe. But if you can allow yourself to have the experience of Where I am right now is for a particular purpose, and in lots of ways when it's a creative output, that purpose is for me. And there's nothing wrong with saying that the purpose of what you're doing is for yourself. We don't do enough of that in modern society either. And then delineating your time. So this is something which I've found really beneficial when I'm trying to do things in a really sort of creative space that I'm putting together for myself. I struggle with it a lot just because there's a lot of things going on in life. I'm always thinking about when my kids need picking up. I'm always thinking about things that could go wrong. I'm a ridiculously anxious person. But if there's some small ritual that you have when you start to do something, it doesn't have to be a creative output. It can be a work output. It can be mowing the lawns, although frankly, flow state with mowing the lawns is one of the easiest things to get into I've come across ever. And then I recommend having something to tell yourself that you're starting a process, that you're finishing a process, but also when you have to pause a process. And that's important for people who work in creative industries, because if you have to work for 8 hours on the trot, it's very hard to just think I'm starting and I'm stopping, because that happens several times throughout the day. And in fact, I could easily, in terms of things to remind myself that my day is ending, I could actually intentionally use my thumbprint in the keyhole idea for that, right? That could be something which I'm not just shoving it in to try and remind myself, but actually telling myself, this is now the end of that. The door is shut on my office, everything is off. This is the thing that reminds me that I'm now switching back to the things of other life. And one of my favorite little hacks for this is the idea of a ritual object. So it can be a bit weird sometimes if you know, it's nice to get your cup of coffee and sit down at your desk and think, now I'm doing something different. That's lovely. But if you don't have your cup of coffee or you're just on the go, it can be a bit hard to find something to use as that sort of key or connection. And it's also really important that we connect our brains and our minds and our experience there through our bodies. And this is something which, again, from our ancestral environment, we have screwed up. We have this idea that our brains are somehow different to our bodies. Our meat suits are being pulled around by the actual CPU up there. And it's just not remotely true. Everything here is a single system. And it's one of the things that drives me mad about medicine, is you go and you get one thing checked out and they focus on that when actually it's all part of one system. And just really quickly, and I know I'm kind of against time. Oh, thanks. But the...
We can kind of blame Descartes a bit for that, but there's this magical
Yeah,
line.
absolutely. But one of the things that has always fascinated me, and it's impossible to know for sure, but the way the ancient Greeks wrote about their bodies and how they thought really does lend this idea that they thought that their thinking process, the thing that was in charge, was their hearts. And some of the writing that they've done lends itself to the belief that actually, so I experience thought in my head because I believe that's what my brain is doing. We can't know for sure. It's probably bullshit. But there is some suggestion that the ancient Greeks actually had that experience in here, because it's all part of one system. Anyway, that's sort of by the by. But in terms of ritual objects, so this is something which I quite like. It's a little kind of hack. This is a little stone boy. And it's something you can keep in your pocket, or you can have a piece of jewellery or a stick, anything at all, or a ring that you fiddle in a particular way. Normally I fiddle it this way. Maybe if I'm trying to put myself into this particular state of thinking, and now there's a transitional phase, I'll just wiggle it the other way. But I do like something like a little stone, or something you can find on the beach, or something that you've picked up from somewhere that you can just have in your pocket. And if you're sitting down to start work, you can just hold it in your pocket. It's not embarrassing. No one needs to know. And you can just think to yourself, and this is the time now when I'm going to really put myself in the state of allowing myself to do something which matters to me in the space where I'm in, and I'm going to carry on with that now. And now I need to make a cup of coffee or go to the toilet, so I'm just going to pause this for a minute. But it's just a nice thing to be able to bridge that connection. It doesn't have to be a special stone. It can be a stone from Bunnings. Much like all of these stones that we have on the table that you came in and checked in through on a little bowl. If anybody would like to take a stone on the way out, you're more than welcome. They're not magical. They are just stones. But you can give them meaning for yourself, which ultimately is what any sort of magical object is. And just very briefly to sum up just a little bit about my journey and where I've got to, because we all die beginners, and I'm very much a beginner in terms of what I'm trying to do. I do love a sense of awe and wonder, and even though a little stone in your pocket that you touch as you start work or go to the toilet or finish work isn't exactly a massive thing. It's being aware of all of these processes in yourself that helps create a sense of awe and wonder about the world. And from my perspective, that's really all I really want. There's nothing that I find more fantastic or magical than that feeling. And in terms of sort of just my journey, I don't do half the daft shit I used to do anymore. But actually the thing that I have found in my sort of quest for ritual as part of a spiritual or meaningful experience of life is I've actually found all of that in my family now, much more so than I ever did in any of the external things that I was looking for. If you'd like to get in touch, I can't imagine why you would, but my email address is there.
What's the backdrop there? Where were you?
Sorry?
The photo.
Oh, that's just in the South Island. That's Milford Sound in the background.
Oh,
Yeah. Anyway, that is me. Thank you very much. If it was nonsensical, I apologise very much. But you can come afterwards and berate me. That's absolutely fine. All right, thank you. Oh, one more thing. Sorry, one more thing. I just wanted to say as well a little bit about my experience of being invited to talk at Creative Mornings. So, Christine and I talked about it. We work in the office. I'm basically here through office nepotism. But it did trigger in me the sort of thought of, but why would I speak at a creative event when I'm not a terribly creative person? I work in search engine optimization, so I'm interfacing between communications on the one hand and algorithms on the other. And I can't really think of anything that seems terribly creative about that. But then I reminded myself, after over a couple of weeks, I got thinking, well, actually, though, I do make the systems and design and program the systems that I use for that, which seems kind of creative. I do sometimes still make websites, which seems kind of creative. I used to make, as just for funsies, I used to make acid-etched bronze plates with designs on for people. I guess that's creative. I tried making music. I tried learning the guitar. I used to do all these things. I used to wear my tweed jacket as a teenager and stand at Aotea Square with a podium like this that I would bring there myself and narrate Violent Femmes lyrics like they were poetry. And all these different things that suddenly sort of cascaded on me. And I thought, well, even though I don't think of myself necessarily as a creative, because most of what I do doesn't seem that way, I definitely am. And so I want to really thank Christine and the team for putting this together. It occurs to me that sort of my experience of doing this was to remind myself that actually there are all kinds of ways in which I'm creative that I don't even really think about all the time. And I'm sure that coming to Creative Mornings for you guys is a very similar experience of that. So I really want to thank them again just for helping to remind us that we are all creative and we are doing quite interesting things even when we don't necessarily think about it. So thank you to the team.
People might have questions.
Oh, questions. I run away from that part usually. Who has questions?
Does anyone have any questions for Peter?
Awesome.
I feel like I saw Peter at Aotea Square.
You know you've done.
Brilliant.
Cool. Lovely.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you. Woohoo! Before you all run away, a quick. Oh, you can. I'll let you do it. You can run. Before you all run. Oh my goodness. Sorry. Where did it go?
By your foot.
Oh no, I'm gonna stand on it. Oh no, I'm good. So our next month September event is not in this space, so we're not at 257. We're going to be at a place called Q Space out in Lower Hutt, just for the month of September. Okay, we will be back at 257 in October.
How do you spell Q as in C?
Q
or
with
Q as in-
just a big letter Q.
Oh, Q.
The information will be coming out very shortly with the address and everything like that. So if you can make it to Lower Hutt, or if you are,
carpool or something.
you could carpool, you could connect with others on the Creative Mornings website. However you want to do it, we'd love to see you out there. And yeah, obviously if you can't make it out, that's absolutely fine. We'll see you again in October. Awesome. So a big thank you and see you later. See you next time.